So it is February 19th. It is 2022. And we're building on oral history that you were giving to me in November of 2021. It's this new technique I'm trying to use where we do a short little bit where, so right now we're focusing only on the second decade of your life. A lot happens then from 10 to 22, or 10 to 20. And just talk about some highs and lows, the characters, key characters, key places, and kind of important events. 10 to 20.
What I think are the important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is your story.
Yeah.
Only you get to choose.
Okay. You asked for it.
Okay.
I'm giving it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so when I was about 10 or 11, I lived in a neighborhood in Chicago, so we played every day after school. I had to practice the piano first before I could go out and play.
Can I ask you to turn off that? Just touch the button to turn that off. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
So I had to practice the piano every day before I went out to play, and I was probably the leader of the block. It was an all-Irish Catholic neighborhood, so all the kids went to Mass. All the kids took me to the Catholic church. This is to my detriment, but we went in and we take a little sip of the holy water. We lit all the candles in the church in the front. We were bad. They were the ones, it was their church, it wasn't mine. They'd tell me about all the wicked nuns that used to slap their fingers at the Catholic school. But it was a very fun place to be. Then when I was about 10 or 11, one of the girls at my school invited me to go to this, it was called Girls Missionary Guild. It was like a girls club at her church, and it was a little walk from my house. It was probably about 4 or 5 blocks from the house. So I went with her the first couple of times, and then one day this red-haired woman stood up, and I kind of related to her because my hair used to be real red. It doesn't look very red right now. And her name was Shar, and she told this story about Jesus and about why he came to earth. I mean, I knew about Jesus and I went to a church, but I never really understood what the sequence, why he came to this earth at all. And she explained that, and she told me that he was a way, he is the way to God. And it was like, really? I never got that before. And I walked out of that room that day. I never talked to anybody that was in there. She asked if you wanted to talk to her or whatever, but I sat there, I talked to God myself and told him, I want you to be my Savior. And I remember walking out the door of that little church with my friend Donna, and I said, Donna, I understand who Jesus is and what he did for me. And it was like a huge relief went off of me, because I wondered about death. Even as a young girl, what would happen to me if I died? I don't know what would happen. But it was a great explanation. And then maybe a year later, my brother came to the same conclusion, and he was quite a character. He was 2 years younger than me, and he was a very busy boy. And he went also, it was the girl's brother asked him to go to the boys' club that was similar. And he had some funny times there because the church was right next to a lagoon. So he went through the ice on that lagoon one of the times when he was at the church. And Shar, she was the same woman, she had to bring him home. But that one day, Andy, my brother, came home and he said to my mom, Mom, I got saved today. I understand who Jesus is. And from that point on, we begged our parents to go to this other church, because at the church we were at, it was just a lot of ritual, and it was a lot of not something very kid-friendly at all. So when I was 12, my dad decided that we would move out of Chicago, where I'd lived all my life, and he was going to buy a motel in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And he looked all the way from Escanaba to Sault Ste. Marie for motels that were on the lake or somewhere near water. And he finally found one in Sault Ste. Marie. It was about 5 miles outside the city, and he bought it. And we moved there. I think it was on my 12th birthday, actually. My mother and my sister and I took a train up to the Sioux, while my Aunt Coralie and my brother and my dad rode in a truck with all our belongings up through Michigan and to that motel. And so all that summer, my dad, he still worked in Chicago at his business where he was a contractor, and we ran the motel, which meant that I made all the beds. My little sister, she put the little soaps around. She thought that was a hard job. She wasn't even 5 years old. She was 4. And let's see, and my brother, he took all the trash out. My mom, I used to mangle the pillowcases, which means you iron them on a great big machine. For young people that don't know what a mangle is, it's kind of like a wringer washing machine, but you put the things right through it. And then we sent all the sheets out. But it was fun days. We went swimming every day in the St. Mary's River. We had to get out of the water because the boats would suck you right into their wake if they went by. Every time they came by, you get out of the water. We had lots of fun living there. We used to dive under the buoys that were out in the middle of the river. My mother did not. A buoy is a huge.
Some people are picturing like a little.
No. This is a huge, big. It's as big as this room. No, it's bigger than this room. The bottom of it is like a round circle, and then it goes up, and it was black. And actually, there was a shooting club, an Isaac Walton shooting club, right down the road from us, and they would throw these pucks up into the air. They're clay pigeons. That's what they call them. And if you could find them whole and bring them in, they'd pay you for them. So we would dive down under there. There were huge big beams under the buoy that we'd sit on and just talk and goof around.
In the darkness under the buoy.
I don't know. There must have been some light showing through that, but it wasn't that. I don't remember it being real dark.
I didn't sat underneath it.
You have to dive down under it and then come back up.
That's great.
Yes, it was fun. Mother had no idea what we were doing. My sister, on the other hand, played in the cemetery across the street. We had a pretty free childhood. Mom was not a hard disciplinarian, although when I was younger, I got a spanking every day of my life. My sister never got spankings, just for...
Let the record show.
Let the record show. Yes. And let's see, then we went to we were in a township school, so it was real different going into the city high school because we didn't know anybody, and they kind of treated the township kids like they were the farmers, the hicks and whatever, and you kind of felt like that. Although I had lots of friends, and in high school I was the president of our homeroom. I was the president of our homeroom also in junior high. I'm thinking, I don't remember that I was quite that in charge, but as I thought back, oh dear.
That's surprising.
Yeah. And when we were in 7th grade, when I moved to the Sioux, I was in 7th grade. So I met this kid named Bill Rudd. And I really didn't like him that much. I thought he was a smart aleck. He knew everything about the Bible. We met that I remember, we met in Sunday school. He thinks we met at a basketball game, but I remember being in Sunday school with him, and he knew the answers to everything. I was a fairly new believer in Jesus, and I knew very little. So then I did go into high school there, and it was a pretty normal experience. I had lots of boyfriends here and there and everywhere. And then when I was a senior in high school, my brother was, let's see, he was a sophomore, and he was the co-captain of the junior varsity football team. He was the halfback, the running back that carried the ball on that team. He liked to hunt, and my dad had taught him, both of us, everything about hunting. And at the time, there was no gun safety classes, anything like that. So one October evening, he went hunting with just another, the other kid was about 12 years old, and he went hunting with him. They were duck hunting back in just some neighborhood woods.
What was it called? Neighborhood Woods?
It was right next to the cemetery, and then it was right, it was behind a gas station. I mean, I wouldn't even think of it as heavy woods at all. But we got a call from that gas station that this kid had run into the gas station, just hysterical. He said, Andy's been shot, he's out in the woods, and I don't know where he's at. And so immediately the gas station called our house, and I answered the phone. And I said, they said Andy's been shot, and they don't know where he is. And I called to my dad, and the other car had gone into the Sioux. My mom was going bowling. She did see the ambulance coming out, and she just had a terrible feeling. And so when she got to the bowling alley, this is in the days of no cell phones, things like that. You didn't do communications. My dad immediately jumped on a bicycle and ran and biked down. It's not a mile probably from where we were. Maybe it's a mile. I don't think it's even that much. And he had to get off that bike and run into the woods and look for my brother. And he found him, and he picked him up, which he was a very athletic, all muscle person, and he had to carry him out of the woods. And not until my dad was 90 years old, he said to my mother, Margie, I've seen a ton of terrible things in my day. I've been in war, but I have never seen anything like looking at my son lying there bleeding. He kept that in him all those years. If you can imagine, my father was a giant in many ways. But he carried him out, and he knew he was gone. And my mom at the same time called me, and I was calling her at the bowling. The phones never rang. She was just there on the phone. I said, Mom, go to the hospital right away. Andy's had an accident. And because she didn't know if he was dead or alive. She went to the wrong door. They were doing construction. She was so overcome, and then she finally got in there, and nobody knew who she was. They didn't know her son just was in a terrible accident. They just didn't help at all. So it was really hard. But both of my parents, because they believe that God has control of our life, their reaction to it was, okay, God, I hate this, but I trust you more than anything. My dad, this is supposed to be my story, but I watched my father, who was Mr. Jovial usually, and he loved being in Michigan. It was not so much pressure on him, but I watched him for a whole year, and he was in a state of depression that I'd never seen. I mean, he was not clinically depressed, but he was depressed. I could see he wasn't as jovial as normal. But they stood at that funeral, and all these kids knew my brother. I mean, they loved him. He was a very popular kid. And the whole school was let out for the funeral, which it was had in our little Calvary Baptist church in the Sioux, which is not very big. So kids were all at the underneath level, and they just taped it. There were not big screens like we have now. This is 60 years ago. And they stood with these kids by the casket of my brother, and they were sobbing and crying, and they would say, "We know Andy's in heaven," because he had made that decision to love Jesus. And so that was a very hard year, because my parents lost their only son in October. Then in the springtime I graduated and I was ready to go off to college, and they really didn't want me to go anywhere. And I talked to them a lot, and I wanted to go to this school that was very far south, very far away, and Dad didn't really want me to. I remember one night I was getting ready for bed, and Mom and Dad were in their bed, and he said, "Gloria, come on in here." He said, "You could go." That was hard. Anyway. And of course I wouldn't see them again. Changed my sister's life. She all of a sudden became an only child. And her view of what our family was like was very different than what my view of my family. I lived in Chicago. She hardly knew that part of life, and I was over here, and I knew a lot different life than she did. But okay, so when Bill and I were in college, the year that my brother died, Bill was in the hospital, so he was no big help at all. We were going together then. We started to go together seriously when we were about 16. And as seriously as that was. And he, let's see, by the time he was going, I told him a bunch of different colleges that I was thinking of going. I was thinking of going into nursing. But, God in his mercy did not allow me to become a nurse. Because I would not like cleaning up somebody's mess. Vomit I maybe could take, but the other, So that was a wise thing. And we ended up going to the same school, and we were there for 2 years. In the summer after our sophomore year, he proposed to me at the cabin. So I was about 19.
And what is the cabin?
The cabin, his cabin that's on Lake Huron in the Upper Peninsula. And the funny thing was, it was the longest day of the year. It was June 21st, and he was waiting for it to be dark because he wanted it to be very romantic. And he never kissed me in all those years. We decided we were going to do that because we just didn't want to mess things up, and maybe we never would get married, and we just wanted to save ourselves for whoever was the right person. So he kept looking at the sun, and the sun was still there. It was like 10 o'clock at night. Let's move into the cabin. So we did. Bam. We moved into the cabin, and he got down on his knees in front of me in the rocking chair and asked me, and he told me this long sob story about what it'd be like to marry somebody in ministry. And well, to me, it was not a big deal because I felt just as much called into ministry as he did. I could sure use a Kleenex somewhere, but sorry about the crying. Anyway, I told him, "Are you kidding?" I was very shocked. Even though we've been going together for a long time, my mother said, "Well, is that Rudd ever is he ever gonna propose to you?" And I said, "Oh, maybe at Christmas." It was just before my birthday. It must have been before my 20th birthday. I was still 19. And he did that. He gave me this beautiful ring that I still have, which I'm very thankful for. He's such a sweet boy. And then when we were 20, the next summer, about 10 days after we got out of school, our junior year, we got married in the Sioux. And that was quite a crazy wedding also. Seems like most things we do are pretty crazy. And my sister coughed through the whole wedding